Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Annie, this is Stanley, and we're here to talk about books. But before we get to the books, I just wanted to say a couple of things because I feel like I've kind of leveled up a bit in the last week or two. I was approaching 100 subscribers and then I posted my first Stargate SG-1 TBR game video, and I'm now, as of filming, on 106, so woohoo! We made it, Stanley, over 100 subscribers. So I did say in my last couple of videos that if we topped 100 subscribers, then I would do an Ask Stanley Anything video. And we've only got a couple of questions so far, so do drop some questions down in the comments section, either for Stanley or for me. And when we've got a few more, we'll do the video and answer the questions. I've also, at the same time, completely coincidentally, figured out how the magnet works on the back of my microphone, so I don't have to have it strangling me on the neck of my t-shirts anymore. And I've also figured out why the tripod was trembling in most of my videos. So if you've noticed that and been annoyed by it, I'm very sorry. I've fixed it now. There's a table just there. You might notice the angle has changed, which also houses Dave's PC, and I think there were vibrations from the PC, so I've put the tripod on a different table, so it's not gonna wobble anymore. So anyway, there we go. Today's video is me talking about all the books I read in May, but first of all, let's make some tea. So here we are at the tea drawers. Everything is ready. 10. So that is green apple and mango. Sounds like an excellent combination to me. Good old past me has already boiled the kettle. Oh, feeling a bit parched today, so I will look forward to drinking this, even though it is quite warm outside. Don't seem to mind drinking tea in hot weather. Yay. So, now that we've got our tea, let's get to the books. It has been quite a month. It feels like May has lasted forever. I think that's because so many exciting things are going on for me in June and July. But, you know, having a slow month, appreciating time passing, not speeding along into the future is a good thing. But I've made a foolish error, because I normally film half the reviews for the month part way through the month while the books are still fresh in my mind, and I didn't do that this month. It's the 31st of May as I'm filming this, and I finished my last book this morning. So I've got some notes off to the side, so if I'm looking at my notes, then please forgive me, because I can't remember what I read. I mean, I'm getting old. It's like 3-4 weeks ago. You can't expect me to remember. So anyway, I've had a lot of fun with the new Reddit Fantasy Bingo prompts. If you don't know what that is, it's a year-long reading challenge with a bingo board of 25 prompts to fill, and they come out on the 1st of April. So I've been including those, and I'm super, super excited for the Herkyard 3.0 hardest reading challenge you'll ever do prompts that are coming out at the start of June. So I think they'll be just about to be released, or just have been released when this video goes up. So I will be frantically planning my Herkyard reading by that point. Anyway, so much waffle. Come on, Stanley, keep me on track. Let's get to some books. First of all, I finished an audiobook, A Holy Maiden's Guide to Getting Kidnapped by Katie Nyquist, which was recommended to me by Louise over on Foxes and Fairy Tales. And it could fulfill quite a few of the Reddit Fantasy Bingo prompts, and I'm keeping my options open this year. I've previously, with challenges, I've kind of locked in my books every time I've finished one, but I'm kind of giving myself some flexibility to move things around if things change later. So I could use it for Game Changer because there is a competition that the protagonist takes part in. I could use it for court politics or intrigue because there's quite a lot of that going on. And I could also use it for judge a book by its title because it's probably the best title of a book that I'm going to be reading anytime soon. Anyway, it follows Isabel, who is the holy maiden of the title, whose job is to heal people. So she has a magical healing ability, but every time she heals someone, it takes a day off her own life. And she works for a fairly terrible government regime, church, in the fantasy world in which she lives, and she's desperate to find a way out of her situation because she believes that she's going to be sacrificed once her power reaches its peak or something like that. Anyway, she meets a Dark Lord, the Dark Lord Kane, who she discovers in a rather ridiculous fashion. And then there's a romance and there's a competition and there's lots of shenanigans. And I really liked all of the peripheral characters, the rest of the people in her friendship group who work for her. The romance was fine. It's not like usually a massive thing for me in books. The tone, though, was a bit flippant. It was very kind of comedic and irreverent, so it wasn't my kind of humour. And it felt like it kind of diminished the emotional impact of the book a bit, especially since the audiobook narrator really over-read everything, so everything was all the time, and that got a bit much. I did get used to it as it went along, and I enjoyed it overall, but I'm not planning on continuing with the series, but I'm glad to have read it. So thank you, Louise, for the recommendation. 3.5 stars. Next up, I read the first 3 volumes of Frieren Beyond Journey's End, which is a long-running manga, and I read these as part of my Dice Dictate My Day vlog, which went up earlier in May. So do take a look at that one if you want more detailed review of these. It's about an elf who has been part of an adventuring group that have defeated the big bad evil, and now everything's settled down. She goes on a journey to revisit various places and people that she's been connected to along the way. I mostly enjoyed it. I very much loved volume 1. Volume 2 got quite dark and volume 3 was very silly, so there's lots of variety as you might expect from a manga, but I'm definitely carrying on with the series at least for a little bit. And overall rating for the first 3 volumes, 4 stars. Next up was an ebook, which I also started for the Dice Dictate My Day vlog, but I didn't finish it during that vlog because it was just one day, and that's Search and Recovery by Christine Catherine Roosh, which is number 11, I think, in her Retrieval Artist universe. And that follows, it went back in time from where book 10 finished to the events of book 8, I think, where there was a terrorist attack on the moon, and I don't know, it didn't really do it for me, which was disappointing because I really loved this series overall, but because we went back in time and it was all stuff that I already knew about, it didn't feel like it added anything new. And I said that in the Dice vlog, and unfortunately it didn't get any better as it went along. I mean, there were some additional aspects, there were a couple of new characters, but it didn't feel as though it really added anything to the series, which was a shame. But I am going to carry on because I've only got 4 books left out of the 15 to read. And book 12 does carry on from the end of book 10, so I'm hoping that that will put things back on track. But sadly, only 2.5 stars for Search and Recovery. The audiobook that I listened to in the Dice vlog was The Matchmaker's Gift by Linda Cohen-Leugman, which follows a young woman who is a divorce lawyer in New York in the mid-1990s, who is given the journals of her grandmother, who worked as a matchmaker in the early 1900s. And the magical twist is that Sarah, the matchmaker, has an ability where if she sees someone's soulmate, she can see a line of light connecting them together. And so she uses that to produce love matches in a time when matchmakers normally, it was all about money and marriages of convenience and business arrangements and that kind of thing. And I really enjoyed this. It was great. The magical twist added some interest to it. It was light. It was fairly easy to listen to. I liked both of the plot threads, which in a time split book is often quite difficult. You sometimes prefer one to the other, but I enjoyed them both equally. The first half did feel quite slight and as though it was going to be really predictable, but it really ramped up in the second half and went to some places that I wasn't expecting. Absolutely loved this. 4.5 stars. And then the review you've all been waiting for, or possibly not, I don't know. I finally got around to listening to Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinnerman. I did it. And everybody was right. God damn it, Donut. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be annoyed that I really enjoyed a book, but I'm kind of annoyed that I really enjoyed this book. Not least because it's like a massive series and they get bigger and bigger, and series always do. If you are familiar with Dungeon Crawler Carl, I'm not going to add anything new to the conversation. I'm only going to say the same things that everybody else has said in the last year to year and a half. So you can skip ahead a few minutes if you don't want to listen to it all again. But if you want my views on Dungeon Crawler Carl, here we go. It's set around about now, I guess. Aliens turn up, they squash everything in the world, so most of the people die when all of the buildings disappear, but then they open up stairs down into a dungeon and survivors have the opportunity to go into the dungeon and take part in a massive reality TV show that's broadcast across the universe. And it's all tied into video games. So when Carl looks at stuff, little text boxes pop up, and he has an inventory in his head that means that he can like teleport things out of nowhere into his hands and stuff. And it's all very silly. Well, it's not actually all very silly. It's mostly very silly. But I was worried that the humour wouldn't be to my taste, and that is true. But the humour is largely confined to the text boxes that come up when Carl looks at stuff or monsters or other people. I think Matt Dinnerman is treading a very fine but quite clever line, because the fact that Carl kind of rolls his eyes at the humour and doesn't respond to it, and the fact that it is confined to that particular aspect, gives the suggestion that maybe Matt Dinnerman is satirising the kind of humour that you get in these types of video games. And as someone who has edited an awful lot of video game text, I know that that is an accurate representation of the sort of humour that you get. But so he's kind of getting the readers who would be potentially offended by that humour by going, oh, I'm satirising it. But he's also got the humour in the book. So he's also managing to keep hold of the people who enjoy that humour. So props to you, Matt. Very clever. But having said that, there is humour outside of that aspect. The book made me laugh out loud in the street, which is always a good sign, and quite unusual for me. I went on a bit of a roller coaster. It was like laughing, eye rolling, wincing, cringing, going, ew. But it was all happening. And as I was hoping, there was also some character development, some deep emotional aspects, not massively in the first one, to be fair. The relationship between Carl and Donut the cat was really lovely and will, I'm sure, develop further. Donut's really funny, as everyone said. The audiobook is the way to go because Jeff Hayes, who does all of the voices, it's unbelievable that he actually does all of the voices, is phenomenal. And there's also like sound effects here and there which are really good but not overwhelming. Yeah, I mean, it was fantastic. I'm not going to lie, it was absolutely fantastic. I listened to all 12 hours at one-time speed in 4 days and wanted to go straight into the next one. So I'm in it now. 5 stars, nothing else really to say. Next up was The Paying Guests by Sarah Waters, which is set in the early 1920s, and it's about a young woman and her mother who have to take in lodgers after the war because their finances have gone awry, and there's interesting relationship development between the young woman who owns the house and the wife of the couple who move in. To begin with, like the first half of this book, I was like nearly missing my train stop when I was travelling to places because I was so absorbed. And then there was this quite dramatic shift about halfway through and it turned into a completely different story, and it just got really dreary and also overly melodramatic, which is an impressive combination to pull off. And yeah, it really fizzled out for me by the end. And Sarah Waters' books, I think I might be done with Sarah Waters because her books are never as good as I want them to be. I looked back at my previous reviews because I have it in my head that I really like her books, but when I look at my reviews, it's not true. So she's got this kind of like hold in my head of, oh, when I see a Sarah Waters book, I'm like, oh yes, excellent, I'll read that. And then it doesn't actually turn out to be as good as I would prefer. So there we go, 2.5 stars. Next up is another audiobook and another recommendation from Louise at Foxes and Fairy Tales. So thank you very much to Louise for this one. And that's The Incandescent by Emily Tesh, which is set in a school. It's a modern day school, which took me by surprise because I thought it was going to be a kind of standard fantasy type world, but it's our world. Only there is magic, so magic is taught at the school, and we're from the point of view of Safi, who is the deputy head of the school and also the director of magic. And the magic is all surrounding summoning demons and getting demons to do stuff for you. Well, there's different types of magic, but Safi's particular specialty and the main focus of the book is demon summoning. But for a book that's set in a magical school about demon summoning, it's, for the most part, it's not true the whole way through, for the most part, it's actually more about school governance and risk assessment and teaching and teacher relationships with students and all of the stuff that goes along with that. So I could see why some people might think that it was quite boring, but I loved it. Oh my God, it was so good. As a bisexual ex-teacher who is in her 40s, I felt very, very seen. Safi's not quite 40, but she's getting up there. And the rest of it, absolutely true. And also would prefer to sit in her room of an evening filling in quality assurance and risk assessment forms than going out and spending time with people. Yes, she is basically me, which is always helpful in a book. The audiobook was good. I really enjoyed this. It did have moments of excitement. I really enjoyed the romance. It's not a massive part of the book, which probably helped because I don't like books that are all romance and pretty much nothing else. But I did very much enjoy the romance aspects. And the protagonist actually went to the same Oxford University College as me. So that was yet another, she really is me. She's just me. And it went to some places I wasn't expecting. What I thought was going to be the main climax actually happened quite early on. And then the second supposed climax was also a bit of a red herring. So yeah, there were some twists and turns. It did something very weird with the narrative viewpoint towards the end, which I initially thought was really clever, but it just went on a bit too long, and that's the only reason that it's not getting 5 stars from me. It probably ought to get 5 stars because I was fully invested, wholly immersed in the world of the book, despite the fact that I was mostly thinking I wanted to get back to Carl and Donut. So excellent. 4.5 stars, just because it lost me a bit towards the end with the weird narrative section that went on just a bit too long. But great, thank you, Louise, because I never would have found this book otherwise, and it was great. Next up is the final book that I started in the Dice Dictate My Day vlog, and that's The Murderer's Ape by Jakob Vergelius, which is about a gorilla who is a ship's engineer in, I don't know, it's historical, but I can't remember when exactly it's set, late 1800s, I think. And her friend, the chief, gets falsely accused of murder, and she has to try and figure out how to save him. I really struggled with this book. You will see if you watch the Dice vlog, I wasn't getting on brilliantly with it because it's so incredibly slow. It says on the back, grand adventure, desperate quest, but she doesn't go on the quest until halfway through. And the rest of the time, nothing is happening. She doesn't really interact with the characters directly because though she can understand what everybody says and she can write and read, she can't speak. So there's no actual conversations with her. So everything is just kind of like happening around her, and it's first person, so we're in her head. It's not a huge amount of depth of emotion. I did put it down. I did soft DNF it, which I've never done before with a book at one point, and then I came back to it later in the month and carried on for a bit. But I just, even after the grand adventure and the desperate quest fully started, it still really didn't go anywhere, and it's a chunky book and very little actually happens in this book. So unfortunately I did hard DNF it before the end because I just couldn't do it. I wasn't prepared to. I really wanted to see the chief hopefully get saved and let out of prison, but he was in prison for like, I don't know, multiple years because Sally Jones didn't get on with stuff. So yeah, unfortunately that was a DNF. Next up, I went straight back to Dungeon Crawler Carl with Carl's Doomsday Scenario, the second in the series by Matt Dinnerman. And it took me a few more days to read this one, but not a lot. There were potentially diminishing returns. Certainly didn't make me laugh as much. And it is all pretty much just the same over and over again, but it's still wildly entertaining. And there's so many levels, not just in the dungeon, there's so many levels to this. And I think the genius of it is that he sets up so many things early on that are then going to come back later in the story. And it does do some unexpected things. The relationships get deeper. The emotional trauma, I guess you would say, gets deeper. There is development of various aspects. I still really enjoyed it, but not nearly as much. Well, no, just a bit less than the first one. So I'm giving the second one 4.5 stars. Then I read Sleeper's Castle by Barbara Erskine. I have 3 of her books on my shelf now, and this is the first one, the most recent one I obtained, but the first one that I have read. It is a split timeline between a woman in the present day who agrees to look after a friend's house and cat for a year while the friend goes to Australia. And she discovers a connection with a woman in the 1400s, and they connect together through their dreams, which sounded really good, and it was fine. It got a bit saggy in the middle, definitely a saggy middle book. It was very involving in the beginning, and it got involving again towards the end, but in the middle it just seemed very repetitive to me, so it wasn't a massive success. And the antagonist in the modern day storyline was just an absolute caricature of evil with no reasoning behind it, which also detracted somewhat. The romance, I actually could have done with more of the romance, which is unusual for me. It was a bit nothingy. So yeah, it was fine. Damning with faint praise, definitely. 3 stars. I also finished another audiobook, which was Phoenix Extravagant by June Ha Lee, which follows a non-binary protagonist artist living in a fantasy world where their home country has been invaded and taken over by a different country. And they are recruited by the Ministry of Armour to paint the magical symbols that bring the automata to life. And they are particularly asked to work with a giant dragon automata. And yeah, it was interesting. It was very slow and not much happened until right near the end. But I didn't mind that. I enjoyed the narrative, I enjoyed the pace, I enjoyed the world building and all of the politics and that kind of thing. I liked the protagonist. The biggest issue I had with it was the romance, which is often an issue for me because there was no basis for it. Jebby, the protagonist, definitely had a physical attraction to the love interest, but that wasn't mentioned immediately, so that sort of came out of nowhere. And then how it then developed, there was no basis for whatsoever, particularly the love interest, because we didn't get her perspective, so we didn't see things from her point of view. So it just, she seemed really mean and grumpy, and then suddenly it was all hearts and flowers. So that was a bit weird. And also the ending was super weird. Jebby didn't really do very much. Didn't really have a huge amount of agency. Moments here and there where they did something quite dramatic, but most of all they were just along for the ride and things were happening to them. They did take part in the climax, which was, bits of it were quite grim, which took me by surprise because it didn't match the tone of the rest of it. And then the very end was super, super weird. And also quite nebulous. It doesn't seem as though, from my research, it's a series or going to be a series, but it didn't feel like the end of the story. But anyway, overall, I did really enjoy it, and it did pass a few days in between my Dungeon Crawler Carl installments. So I'm giving it 3.5 stars. And I can neither confirm nor deny that I might be halfway through Volume 3 of Dungeon Crawler Carl already. What are we going to do? We are where we are. And last but not least, I read The Downstairs Girl by Stacey Lee, which is about a young Chinese woman in the... when is it? Sometime in the 1800s, late 1800s, who lives in Atlanta and originally works in a hat shop and then becomes a maid for one of the rich families, but also, for various reasons, starts a column in the newspaper about relationships and equality, but has to hide her identity. There's a lot of themes of racism and oppression of minorities in this book. A bit sledgehammery, I have to say, but perhaps that's what's needed. I mean, I can't speak to that, so I shouldn't really criticise that, I don't think, because I think people do need to be hit over the head with these kinds of things because there's still a lot of it that goes on. I found Jo, the protagonist, very engaging. I liked all of the stuff to do with wordplay. There's a lot about words in here, and that's the basis for the romance, which I really enjoyed. I didn't know where it was going the whole time. There were lots of interesting interrelationships. Really fantastic execution of a twist in this book, particularly for me. Some people might guess earlier on, but I didn't. Where when the twist was revealed, I was like, oh my God, of course. How on earth did I not see that coming? So it was incredibly satisfying because it had been seeded really well throughout the book. So it made absolute sense, but I didn't get it before it happened. So very impressive. The ending was maybe slightly over the top in some ways, and also lacking in other ways. So there was an exciting climax which went a bit far, and then various things were just left unresolved. I was like, how on earth is this going to get resolved? Because there's no way for it to be resolved in the story, and it just wasn't. So overall, 4 stars. Really enjoyed it. Great historical novel. Lots of really interesting stuff about the American South at that time period. Particularly interesting Chinese viewpoint, because we get a lot of stories about the black experience at this time. But the interesting layer was that this was the Chinese experience, which was quite different in a lot of interesting ways. So yeah, really enjoyed it. 4 stars. Whoa. So that's my stack for May. Pretty varied in terms of format, topic, style, tone, content, ratings. So, you know, interesting month. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a question down in the comments, either a question for me or a question for Stanley for the Ask Stanley Anything video. And if you are one of my subscribers, thank you so much. If you are a long-time subscriber, you're amazing. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you for sticking around. And if you're a new subscriber, welcome. And thank you very much for subscribing. I hope you continue to enjoy the content. But I also hope you're having a good reading month. Let me know down in the comments what your top book for May was and what you're looking forward to reading in June, and if you're super excited about Herkid 3.0. Putting those down because they're quite heavy. But yes, I will see you again in another video very soon. Bye for now.